8 to 10 p.m. The Viewpoint with Ashraf Garda. The Viewpoint with Ashraf Garda.
Absolutely. Welcome indeed to you. Welcome to The Viewpoint. And The Viewpoint continues for the next 2 hours from 8 to 9 as always. We have a big hitter in studio, and from 9 to 10 we look at a big picture. The big picture we're looking at today, sadly, is crime. As you know, there's been 3 incidences. A patient killed at a hospital or a clinic at Alex. Then there were 2 young girls who were hanged in the northwest, and a 9-year-old who got caught up in a hijacking, and she sadly was killed. But the reality is that seems to be happening so often. Leaving aside the issues of cash in transit heist, which is another whole story completely, right? So we'll talk about that. We'll get 4 people to talk about it from different angles, and I also want your thoughts, certainly from a community point of view, in terms of what is being done, what can be done to stamp out crime, to ensure that we can turn that around. Let's get to the big picture, however, and so every day we have a guest who is our big hitter. Catherine Constandinides is that person today. She's done so many things, and let me see if I can remember. She's been involved with Miss Earth, the original Miss Earth, and also parts of that, the organization here in South Africa. Also involved as a judge at One Day Leaders, so and being involved with the Kathrada Foundation. I'm trying to sort of rattle off to see how many things I know. Okay, then involved in a whole range of issues around socio-political issues, but at the bottom line, she's a social activist. What's your right title? Well, your Twitter handle says change agent, right?
That's it, change agent SA.
Okay.
But I think that sort of encapsulates everything. I'm a nation builder, and everything I do is really at the core and heart of that, and defending human rights on our continent.
Okay, and of course you were in Rwanda a few days over the weekend. In fact, you've just come back, but we'll talk about that if we get a chance later on. Let's get to the real issue that you're talking about here. So you, as the big hitter, we'll talk about the Sahrawi. Now, in terms of the tweets between yourself, myself, and Tabisa Musia, we're referring to this, this last colony in Africa or state that's not independent, and I'm sure listeners will be saying, what are these guys talking about here? So give us some geography here. When we talk about the Sahrawi, who are they and where are they?
We're talking about a country that is directly south of Morocco. The country is called Western Sahara. The people are called the Sahrawi. In 1975, their country was illegally invaded and occupied by Morocco from the north and Mauritania from the south. There was a civil war that broke out, and the Sahrawi's only exit point was into a border of Algeria, where a temporary refugee camp was set up. That temporary refugee camp was set up in 1975, and today, 42 years later, the Sahrawi refugees are still in those very refugee camps. So it's like
a permanent refugee status, if I can call it that.
Absolutely, that's correct. Yeah. In 1991, there was a ceasefire that was called for by the UN, and that ceasefire was called for on the premise that a referendum would be held within 6 months. So a UN peacekeeping force known as MINURSO was set up in the occupied territory and was supposed to be mandated to set up a referendum that 27 years later has still not taken place due to the aggravation of Morocco within that process. And also just to mention that in 1975, the Madrid Accord was signed by Spain, who was the colonizer of Western Sahara.
So before that, it was
That's
Spain.
correct.
Right, okay.
Spain was colonizing the territory, and Spain signed an agreement that saw the natural resources of Western Sahara, because once again, this goes back to natural resources, signing a deal to say they would leave as the colonizer. But Mauritania and Morocco were able to now take over the plundering of these resources on condition that Spain would get a percentage of the sales of those natural resources.
Which by the way, is to quote Ali Mazrui, the famed scholar from Kenya, saying that the crown jewels is really what it is. The economic wealth is the crown jewels, referring to parts of Africa and South Africa. So in fact, you're saying Spain held onto the crown jewels.
Absolutely.
Which is the share of the oil, etc. So when Spain exited, what was the plan at that stage?
Well, when Spain exited, that was the spark of the civil war, because at that point Morocco and Mauritania moved in from a military perspective and started to take occupation, and that occupation saw the Sahrawi retaliate. So there was an actual civil war. There was blood spilt in that region, and that went on from 1975 right up to 1991, when that ceasefire was called for and the UN tried to take control of the situation. But that is not exactly how it happened, or what then happened there moving forward, because the Sahrawi have still not been able to get a referendum. They are still living in the refugee camps, where there is now a humanitarian crisis taking place, because those were set up as a temporary measure. And there are Sahrawis that are in the occupied territory who go through human rights abuses, torture on a daily basis, and nothing is done. The world's media is not there. And the reason that the world's media is not there, sadly, is because blood is now not being spilt in the region.
Well, I mean, that was my next question. Why? You've been speaking about it. I think you first brought it to our attention 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 3 years ago, at an event where Ahmed Kathrada was there. I remember that very, very clearly. But I mean, certainly we're not, we in South Africa don't make a big enough noise about it, number one. But the world doesn't, it doesn't seem to be part of the UN agenda when we talk about issues of human rights. Why is that the case from a UN point of view? So
from a UN point of view, one must actually realize that this is the longest outstanding issue on the UN Security Council agenda in its history. The issue of Western Sahara continues to just be deferred, and one's got to understand the politics behind that. Morocco has an ally who sits as a permanent member at the UN Security Council, and that's France. So the veto vote
across the Mediterranean.
Absolutely. So the veto vote gets accounted for, and the issue of Western Sahara continues to be ignored. There is no political will to fix this issue, because those that are gaining from the illegal plundering of the natural resources, the sale of the phosphates in that territory, the sale of the agricultural products being grown in Western Sahara, and the fisheries along the fishing coastline, a very rich fishing coastline. These are all things that are benefiting those who can keep all of this hush and quiet.
That would be France, Morocco,
Morocco.
Mauritania.
Mauritania actually removed themselves. However, they sit on the fence. They are at the mercy of those economic benefits of the border of Morocco.
And Spain? Where does Spain fit in?
Spain removed themselves from this equation. So now what is happening is to say that, in fact, Spain needs to come back to the table and needs to play a part in sorting out this mess. They left this mess behind them and moved out without any responsibility. They now need to be accountable for this. And the other thing I've got to mention is that during this period of time, from 1975 up until 1991, and a little bit after that, Morocco started to build a wall. We all talk about the famous American wall that some president speaks of, but what we don't realize is that the second longest wall in the world lies here in Africa. It's 2,800 kilometers long. It was built by the Moroccans to divide the Sahrawi physically, those in the occupied territory as well as those in the refugee camps. It is known as the Wall of Shame, and it is 4 layers thick. What's worse than that is it is manned by 120,000 Moroccan soldiers.
So you can't cross over?
You cannot cross it. Even if you try to cross it, you would be putting your life at risk, not because of the soldiers that man it, but because of the more than 7 million landmines that lie on either side of that wall.
Okay. My guest, Catherine Constandinides, who's a change agent, who's a social activist, but certainly has a very special interest in the Sahrawi people, or as she says, Western Sahara. Do they call it the Sahara Republic as well?
It's called the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic.
That's the full name, but generally Sahrawi Republic.
Western Sahara.
By the way, if you have any interest, and I'm sure you would, interest in this, what about calling in 0891104207? What do you know about this people, this group of people we call the Sahrawi? What do you know about them? What would you like to know about them? Or is it simply a case of really not my problem? And they're on this continent, they're on our continent. Even if they were not on our continent, from South Africa's position on human rights, you'd want to take a stance anyway. So if you'd like to call in, 089 1104207. If you're tweeting, as always, hashtag SAFM Viewpoint, and then tag me, Ashraf Garda. You can tag SAFM Radio. In fact, you can tag Catherine on Find as Change Agent. You'll pick up her Twitter handle as well, but you can pick it up from me as you do that. And SMS is 40938. 40938. I'll certainly look at some of your comments just now. Catherine, so that's your view. Is that view contested? If I spoke to somebody from Morocco, is he going to give me another story, or she? Are they going to give me another story and say,
absolutely,
Catherine's completely wrong?
Absolutely. They're going to tell you there's no such thing as Western Sahara. They're going to tell you that it's southern Morocco or the Moroccan Sahara. They're going to tell you that Sahrawi people are not Sahrawi. They're in fact Moroccan. They will also tell you that perhaps that Algeria is keeping their people away from them in refugee camps. So there are many things that they will tell you. And this is part of the greater plan. Morocco has started to colonize Western Sahara by incentivizing its people to move south and to go and live in Western Sahara. So eventually, when the referendum is called for, and it will be, Western Sahara is in fact occupied by more Moroccans than it is Sahrawi.
Okay, and the implications of that would be?
Well, the implications in that referendum, the referendum would not be free and just. In fact, they should say that only Sahrawis should be voting in that referendum, not people living and residing in that territory. However, we're pushing that firstly, a referendum must be called for, and we have to pressurize Western Sahara the UN Security Council to call for that referendum. But secondly, we also at the same time need to call for MONUSCO, which is the UN peacekeeping envoy there, to monitor human rights. It is the only envoy in the world that is not monitoring human rights.
Okay, we're going to find out why. And of course, somebody may be listening in and say, but what does this lady have to say? How does she know about all these type of things? We're in a unique situation. Often we speak to people who are analysts who analyze 5,000 kilometers from the action. Catherine Constandinides has been there, lived in those camps more than once, I can tell you now. So we'll have someone with an eyewitness account of it all. Let's get to some calls. Michael, go ahead from Joburg. Hi, Michael.
Yes, hi. It's been a long time since we've spoken.
Absolutely,
and,
too long.
To your listeners.
Thank you.
And I'm very impressed with Catherine's appreciation of the complexity of this issue, and coming hard on the heels of Africa Day, I think we have to really be aware of the fundamental nature of the internal colonization that's taken place. The South African situation under apartheid was assumed to be, well, certainly designated by the SACP, and I think correctly so, as colonialism of a special sort. And I think we have a similar environment here in Western Sahara. And it's really good to see that it remains, or is certainly gaining traction on the South African agenda.
Well, absolutely. Well said. I think you said it as it is. Thank goodness it's gaining traction. The question is, what is South Africa doing about it? We'll find out in a moment. Thanks for that call, Michael. Appreciate it. Right. More thoughts are indeed welcome. Okay, Catherine, let's get to that. Mm-hmm. So, I've certainly seen tweets from the Minister of Arts and Culture, Natim Tet, was certainly saying the same thing you're saying. But really speaking, what is South Africa doing about it?
I'm really of the belief that, firstly, South Africa is the second largest country that supports Western Sahara and is undoubtedly standing on the fact that self-determination is the answer. Next to Algeria, who house the Sahrawi refugees and do a great deal for the cause, South Africa has the strongest policy in the world for Western Sahara. However, we need to be moving from the policy on paper to action. I believe that South Africa has such a powerful position, both in the UN, at the African Union, at the PAP, and so many other platforms. We need to be using our power in a different way. We need to make sure that we are able to really harness the power of the positions we hold and to drive this agenda as part of an important strategy to move Africa forward. We also need to make sure that our leaders don't only talk about the issue of Western Sahara and the conflict during Africa Month. We must highlight it during Africa Month, but we have to ensure that this is part of the agenda every single day of the year until outcomes that really talk to the fate of these people are spoken about.
And what's South Africa's official position? Meaning, what's their level of identification of Western Sahara?
South Africa's official position is that we fully support the self-determination of Western Sahara. We fully support the Polisario being the political party and leadership of the people of Western Sahara. We house an embassy for the people of Western Sahara in South Africa, and we have very strong diplomatic ties. We do not have strong diplomatic ties with Morocco, and in fact do not have a Moroccan ambassador. We have an embassy and a Charge d'Affaires, but we do not have an ambassador. We do not have that level of diplomatic relations.
And is that directly because of this issue?
That is directly related to this situation.
It's fascinating indeed. We'll get to more thoughts on this one here. And 0891 104 207. So I'll tell you what, I'm not too sure whether we got the position from South Africa. You could be from another political party listening in. Be the DA, be the EFF, be many of the others. And if you have a view on that, if you know what your party view is, you can certainly call in as well. 0891 104 207. The plight of the Sahrawi people. That's what we're talking about with our big hitter for the night, Catherine Constandinides.
Hello, guys. Hi there. Tired of fighting for the remote to watch your favorite TV show? Well, now you don't have to anymore.
Hectic 99 is expanding.
Hectic on 3, the brand new tween show packed with fun, entertainment, and all things tween, launches on the 30th of April at 3 p.m.
#SAFM Viewpoint.
Talking about the plight of the Sahrawi people. So Catherine Constandinides is with us, of course. We're going to find out what position she takes within the issues of the Sahrawi in just a second. So you effectively saying that South Africa's position is consistent with your position in terms of your understanding?
Yes, correct.
All right. And up to now, what sort of stance has South Africa taken? Because you mentioned they need to do, because of their preeminent position, they need to do things differently. So what are they doing besides housing one embassy and sort of having a Cold War with another? What are they doing around this issue?
You know, when it comes to platforms, very important platforms such as the Security Council, the UN Human Rights Council, South Africa and our missions in Geneva and New York both really talk to ensuring that their policy and standpoint is completely for self-determination and sovereignty of Western Sahara. And so in many of those spaces, that is the discussion and viewpoint of South Africa. I just feel that there's so much more that must be done. 42 years later, and the Sahrawi people are still without justice. And I think that it's really important that we as South Africans take the lead and drive this issue to be one that we can be proud to have played an important role to see the right thing being done.
What is the Moroccan narrative? What do they say? What's their story about what actually happened?
The Moroccan narrative is that the Sahrawi people are a tribe of Morocco.
So when the Spaniards exited, they left them exactly the way it should be because they're a tribe of the bigger country.
Yes. The narrative really is that there's no such thing as I mentioned earlier, there's no such thing as Western Sahara. The Sahrawi people are from southern Morocco. If you are Sahrawi in Western Sahara, the occupied territory, you cannot speak your language. You cannot fly your flag. You cannot speak Hassaniya, which is the Arabic dialect of the Sahrawi people. They speak Spanish and Hassaniya as their first languages. They don't speak French. However, in the occupied territory, they're forced to speak French. They're forced to send their children to schools in those areas and practice specific Moroccan traditions, etc., etc. And if you silently protest, if you peacefully protest, you are completely abused, tortured, and the abuse and the Sahrawi political prisoners sitting in Moroccan jails and the injustices being done just on that front are absolutely horrifying.
Okay, we're going to find out more about that. Let's get to calls. To Joburg we stay. In fact, Mohammed on the line. Good chatting to you. Hello. Mohammed, hello.
Hello, Ashraf.
Yes,
good
Mohammed.
evening, Ashraf.
Good evening, thank you. What's your viewpoint, Mohammed?
Your guest.
Yeah.
Ashraf, it's very difficult to get independence from African country. Why I say that? You remember, if we go back to the history, Eritrea and Ethiopia, they were fighting 30 years. They lost 2 million lives. And then at last they got independence. In South Sudan and the North Sudan, they were fighting more than 50 years. They lost nearly 3 million lives. And then what happened also in the part of area in Ethiopia called in Ogad area. From 1957 up to now, they are fighting for independence.
Okay, but Mohammed, what can you tell us about? What can you tell us about?
If they want to get
All right,
independence,
Mohammed,
they must expect to lose more than 1 million lives. It's fair.
So you say if they want independence, they must go for all-out war and prepare to sacrifice lives.
Yeah,
That's what you say. Okay.
I thank you, Ashraf.
All right, thank you. Rather ominous. Would he have a point there? I mean, he's. I hear what he's saying. He's saying, hey, there's no negotiation. You have to go into war, but you're going to lose 1 million lives.
So now the Sahrawi people are a very small nation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's very easy
1 million
to have,
would be all.
Absolutely. just a little bit less than all of their people. However, the sad reality is that if war did break out in that region, within 24 hours, there's no doubt that the world's media would descend on that region. And within 6 months, there would be a negotiated settlement that would speak to the freedom of the Sahrawi people. However, destabilizing the entire North African region again and allowing blood to be spilt just for these people to realize their dream of self-determination and their belief in their inalienable rights that they deserve to go home is not, surely, in this day and age where we have access to the information, surely that cannot be the answer.
Absolutely, I agree, because I mean, people will die, and why would we want to risk that? Let's get more thoughts here. Lorraine, welcome to the show, Lorraine.
Hi, Ashraf and your listeners.
Yeah,
how are you today?
I'm very good. Thanks for calling. I'm not very good. If I take it on the basis of you should be concerned about this. So we can't say, "Sharp, I'm great," isn't it?
Ashraf, I'd just like to say I'm going to take a different point of view. And with Morocco being located geographically in the or classified as Mediterranean, I'm not sure under which union they would fall. And I would imagine, I stand to be corrected, it's the Arab Union. And I think it would be disingenuous of South Africa, as much as there are gross violations in the area we're talking about, shouldn't it be the Arab Union that's taking charge of this, rather than we, South Africa, going to interfere? Because I remember when there were violations in Zimbabwe, we used to say Zimbabwe is a sovereign state.
So like part of SADC,
So where do we draw the line?
Okay,
we've got to be very careful of this. I think we can get involved, but only to a point, at least.
Let's find out, Lorraine. Thanks for that call, Lorraine from KwaZulu-Natal. Explain that, AU, Arab Union.
So Morocco used to be a part of the OAU, the former African Union.
Okay.
However, so has Western Sahara. When Western Sahara signed as a signatory to the OAU, Morocco left. They have not been part of the African Union since then, right up until the beginning of last year. The beginning of last year, there was a vote that allowed them back and to have access and entry back into the African Union. They were the only African country missing from the African Union.
Were they not part of the AU voluntarily because they refused to sign, be sitting on the same table, or were they kicked out? Which one?
No, they removed themselves. Okay. So they refused to sit around the same table as Western Sahara. So they removed themselves from that body. They returned early last year, and that was controversial on its own. The African Union should never have allowed them back in. However, they were able to buy many of their votes, and there's a track record. If you look at where the king was for 18 months prior to that vote taking place, if you look at the gifts that were given by the Kingdom of Morocco to certain African states that used to stand on the side of Western Sahara, it tells a very, very interesting story. South Africa shouldn't just go and take charge and try to solve this. I hear what the caller was saying. However, South Africa must never forget that Africa and many African countries stood in solidarity with us in the darkest time of apartheid. We needed that solidarity from a continental perspective. Morocco is part of Africa, and so is Western Sahara. The Arab countries are not touching this issue. Morocco has a very close relationship with the Saudi kingdom, and therefore there's an allegiance and alliance there.
But there's almost two different Arabic-speaking. One are Arabic-speaking in Asia, which is technically got nothing to do with this problem.
Correct.
The other would be Arabic-speaking countries that are part of the African Union, and they would all be part of that, right? We're talking about Algeria, and Egypt, and Libya, etc.
And those countries fall under the AU. So being part of the African Union, this issue is certainly an African issue, but has not been given priority by the African, the AU or the Pan-African Parliament for that matter. I don't think they have done enough to ensure that this issue is brought to the table and negotiations, discussions, debates are tackled when it comes to the issue of Western Sahara.
I'm going to get to the human side of it in just a second, because I think it's a very important position to find out what actually happens in those camps. Sipho from Bloemfontein, welcome to the show, Sipho.
Hello, Ashraf, and to your guest. Thank you very much.
Good talking to you.
My question is this. I want to appreciate what your guest is sharing. I did not know anything about this information.
Okay.
I'm excited. But I've got one question. Does she know on which side was South Africa when a vote was made regarding the readmission of Morocco into the AU? That's my question.
In terms of last year. Okay, just hold on. Let's get that. Yeah?
South Africa stands firmly next to Western Sahara and with the self-determination of the Sahrawi people. I cannot talk for the chairperson of the African Union at the time, who was a South African. However, the stance of the country has not changed or altered and did not shift even at that time.
Okay, you got that right, Sipho?
Thank you very much.
All right, carry on listening. Okay, it's a fascinating, tragic story that we need to understand fully. Absolutely. There's some comments about political killings. We'll talk about that later on at 9 o'clock, because we will talk about all of that as a 1 hour discussion coming up. Get the big picture around crime. My guest for now, Catherine Constandinides. So here's the story. It's an important issue. It's a tragedy as far as I'm concerned, so I understand it. And if needs be, we'll probably invite the Moroccans to give their side of the story some other time. Otherwise, they may wish to call in, and that's absolutely fine as well. But what happened to you? How did you get involved in all of this?
It's a good question. I should never ever have known about the question of Western Sahara or the Sahrawi people. With my background in Miss Earth, which you have mentioned, I've worked extensively as an international climate activist. I've worked extensively in the space of food security, agriculture, waste, and I was invited to speak by the King of Morocco at a conference being hosted in the occupied territory of Dakhla, but the invitation said the conference is being held in Morocco, hosted by Morocco. However, that was not the case.
So, but that says you're the tourist.
That said,
in effect,
I was invited as a guest speaker, as part of the official program. I was not really keen to go to the conference in the first place. However, after scratching at the surface of trying to work out exactly where is Dakhla in Morocco, because I couldn't find it, I realized something else was going on. I then decided I had to go to this conference to be able to find out for myself what was the actual situation. To cut a long story short, 4 days before I was supposed to leave South Africa, I got a call from the South African state asking me to boycott going to the conference and to not go, because it was
from our country.
From our country.
Okay.
And if I went, they would not be able to support me in that decision. And if anything had to happen to me, there was nothing they could do to help me.
And you must have said, why?
I was now completely taken aback. I'm an ordinary South African doing the work I do, invited to speak on the work that I'm doing and my focus and thought leadership in that space, and was then asked to boycott the conference. Within half an hour, I received an email from the AU asking me the same thing. I immediately said, okay, that's fine, I won't go, because I also had no idea what I was getting into, because obviously this was far greater than even just what I found looking at the surface of it. I was then contacted by somebody who said they were Mohammed from Western Sahara, they were Sahrawi, and they pleaded with me to consider going to the refugee camps and to learn about them. They found out I was going to be speaking at this conference, and they reached out to me and asked me to please come and to listen to their story. I, for 2 weeks, could not sleep. I read everything I could find, the propaganda, the Moroccan viewpoint, the Algerian viewpoint, international pieces. I tried to find as much information, but I still had no idea what was going on. And I begged, stealed, and borrowed the money to be able to make the trip that I had to pay for myself. And after visiting those camps for the first time and spending that time in the refugee camps with a people that were so different to me, I realized when I came home that I had a huge responsibility to them. And in my lifetime, the Sahrawi people will go home. I have a canvas in front of me of one of my children, Mohammed, from my family in the camps. And in my lifetime, I will see Mohammed grow up with his family in Western Sahara, where he rightfully belongs.
So that was the life changer.
Absolutely.
And when you finally went, did you have to go through Morocco?
I'm not allowed to go through Morocco. I'm not allowed to travel through Morocco.
But that first trip?
No. I went through Algeria and traveled via Algeria into the refugee camps. And it's a very long journey to get there. However, it was a life-changing journey and something that really triggered a journey and a lifelong purpose to ensure that I do everything I can and I use the platforms available to me to highlight their story, to tell their story, and to ensure that as a South African, I'm embarrassed I didn't know before. We think we know so much, but what I learned is we don't know what we don't know. And it is up to us to open our minds, to ensure that we look for information. We just sit in and are fed what is given to us, but we don't broaden our minds to understand the rest of our continent. My work and my passion for the continent is really the fact that we don't know our own continent. And South Africa is so self-absorbed by the myriad of things that are going on here. And I can understand that. But we must make sure we open our minds to what is actually going on our very own continent, on our doorstep.
Well, I mean, what you're saying resonates with that call from SIPO, right?
Yes.
And from my side, just so that you know, I mean, I certainly knew about Polisario, and I knew there was a disputed territory. And again, I'll say, well, yeah, didn't bother enough to make a big issue about it. Like,
sure,
it's there. Okay, there's some border skirmish that takes place like in any other part of the world, and that's so it is. So there's a change. What did you discover when you were there? So Mohammed told you to go. Did you ever feel you were being set up at that stage? Because there's always a danger.
There was a huge danger.
That, different groups have different views, right?
Yes, there was a huge danger. It was very scary. I was petrified going in. My family were distraught that I'd insisted that this is what I was going to do. I was frightened. There's no doubt about that. However, there was something deep inside of me that said, you have to make this trip. I can't tell you what it was, but I had to. Every part of me was saying, you have to go. And so I followed that. I followed that gut. And this Ambassador Mohammed has been a dear friend ever since. We've worked very closely together for the past 4 years.
He's based in this country?
He used to be based here.
Right.
And he left shortly after my first visit to the camp. However, 10 days ago, I returned back from my 5th visit and stay in the refugee camps. And I have been able to, it's very strange, this last trip, I was able to navigate myself right around the refugee camps, through the desert in the middle of the night. I always used to be fascinated by the fact that they were guided by the moon. However, I can now understand that so clearly.
You are guided by the moon as well. And the stars perhaps too. Give us a picture. So this refugee camp is in Algeria, which means Algeria would be friendly to
Southwestern Algeria, yes.
Right, okay.
However, it is a state in exile. I must highlight that. The Polisario operate the entire refugee camp. They are in control of the territory. So there is a very strong relationship between the Algerian military, policing, state security, as well as the Polisario army. But they are responsible for the running of the refugee camps, the distribution of aid, because food and water, all is reliant on aid. The Sahrawi refugees get their food from the World Food Programme and a few other donors, and that is distributed. There are 7 ingredients that they get, and over a period of 42 years, they can now actually see a lot of unfortunate small ailments that are starting to come through because these people have only lived on that food.
There's a lack of variety in terms of what they're doing. How and how many people in this camp?
There are just under 200,000 people in the camps. They are scattered across 5 refugee camps. Each of the refugee camps carry the name of a city from Western Sahara.
Okay. So the one that you go to?
I've travelled across all of them, but the main camp that I've been working in is Smara, Bujdur and Rabuni.
Okay. And what do these people do? Let me ask you the stupid question. Do they work? Are they employed? What do they do?
It's no stupid question, a really important question. One must understand that the Sahrawi refugees are living in unlivable land. The condition of the Sahara Desert is very harsh. It is not an Arabian desert that you would imagine one could holiday in. It is harsh, it's rocky, it's extremely hot. The temperatures soar far beyond 48 degrees. They're living in tents and small sand dwellings, so the temperatures do not allow you for you to physically do anything. It is also impossible for them to start up anything entrepreneurial to a large extent, because they have no access to actually bring things in. Because of where they're situated, they're so far removed. So sadly, the Sahrawi refugees have been left in 1975 with very little that has happened from a progressive point of view, and they do have amazing education facilities. These have been supported by both the Venezuelan and Cuban government, who have also allowed to or ensured that tertiary education opportunities for the Sahrawi are made possible, because they run education systems based on their own.
Okay.
And you find very highly educated Sahrawis who have gone away for 6 to 10 years to study abroad and come back to the refugee camps to continue fighting for their people.
Now, your position, and by the way, more calls are, as always, welcome, particularly questions, because I think most people don't really know what's going on. 0891 104 207. So we're talking about this land called Western Sahara, south of Morocco, and the people, the Sahrawi people, and according to Catherine Constandinides, my big hitter for the night, she's suggesting, in fact, that they, at the time that Spain exited that country in terms of being decolonized at that stage, it left under certain conditions. They had certain rights around minerals, and that's another whole debate completely. But it was left to Morocco and to Mauritania to take care of that land. And effectively, over a period of time, the inhabitants of that land, the Sahrawi people, ended up getting absolutely nothing. That's an part that we hear so many other parts of the world. I mean, there's this debate around what's happening around Palestine, and without going into that, you will wonder, there's so much focus on that. Why no focus on this here? Question, what a fearless lady. I salute you. How very sad to hear what happens to refugees. More on The Viewpoint. I want to hear your viewpoint after this.
Sometimes hard work goes unnoticed. The late hours, the sacrifices and commitments that go by without a single well done. To you, the entrepreneur, the job creator, to you who makes a meaningful contribution to society, your turn for recognition has come. Visit eoy.co.za and enter the 2018 Entrepreneur of the Year competition to stand a chance to win your share of 2 million rand in prizes. Proudly sponsored by Sanlam and business partners. Entries closed 31 May 2018.
At SAfmRadio and at Ashraf Garda on Twitter.
We are talking about the Sahrawi people. Do you actually know anything about them? And maybe now that you know, what do you plan to do about it? What about protesting? Is there a different view? Are you not just Moroccan, but you from anywhere in Africa, and say, hold it, Catherine Constandinides has got the story completely wrong. Let me tell you better. This is the story. Because that's the case, I certainly welcome it. Of course, that means you're challenging the South African government at the same time. But in this country, you're entitled. You have a viewpoint, right? 0891 104 207. So, okay, 200,000 people, they can get educated, but they can't trade. Right?
They are probably in the last 5 to 10 years, very small trading opportunities for few have started, where fruits and vegetables are sold that come from, say, the border of Mauritania. Basic things that are needed, bread is now sold. Now, where does the money come from to be able to buy those things? Some family members from the families in the refugee camps go to seek some kind of employment abroad. They go to try to find qualifications abroad. The Sahrawi people's stance is that they believe that their greatest strength is in their human capital. And so they invest very, very much in building human capital, because their belief is once they get their territory back, they are able to take both their state in exile and put that straight into operation. They have an entire parliament, and it operates in their capital camp, which is Rabuni, and they will be able to go and set up operating their country. So many of the Sahrawis have started to travel to work in international NGOs to push their agenda in different platforms. And so some of those people are able to send small amounts of money back to their families in the camps. They're able to buy small things with that. It is also, it's very basic. Very basic. They are not shops. They are not, there are no big facilities at all. They're living in tents and small sand dwellings. These are temporary, as I mentioned before. And in 2015, there was a terrible flood that hit that part of Algeria, and the entire refugee camps were all washed away. Wow. You see a lot less of the actual physical tents now, as you would have 5 years ago even, because people have started to build cement structures. They've started to find ways to create and make their own bricks, large bricks that they're building small dwellings with. And it has started to change the face of the camps from a perspective of 5 years ago. Certainly the first time I entered the camps, all you could see were tents. Now you will see small dwellings across the Sahara Desert. But the conditions are very harsh, so very little is able to be done. There are cars in the refugee camps because they come in second-hand from Spain through the border of Algeria. You can buy cars so cheaply there, and oil is absolutely, it's like buying water here. So, it's a very cheap thing, and they're able to move around the camps quite easily.
Okay, let's get another call. In fact, there's a question from a comment from a listener, Manini, saying, "Wow, I didn't get it when the Minister of Sports said South Africa shouldn't support Morocco on their World Cup bid." Okay, Muzi from Joburg, go ahead. Hi, Muzi.
It's Muzi. I just want to comment on the issue of your host. She just commented that South Africa's position remained the same on Sahara Morocco issue, but South Africa did vote to support the readmission of Morocco. I thank for her hard work in research, but she missed that point.
Okay, they supported the readmission, but the overall support of the Western Sahara people or Sahrawi people remains unchanged.
Yes,
Got
she
that.
said that South Africa did not vote with other countries who supported the readmission. That's only the correction.
Okay, got that. Thank you very much. Yeah. Here's a question from Lee. What can I do to help the Sahrawi? That's a question to you directly.
Yes, thank you for that question, Lee. This is a very important point because on Africa Day, the 25th of May, which was last Friday, the Sahrawi people have launched an international solidarity campaign. It is called Stand in the Sand. It is an opportunity for ordinary citizens anywhere on earth to show solidarity with the Sahrawi people, to stand in the sand with them. It's a campaign that will live across social media platforms, but it's an opportunity for them to also highlight the human rights violations in the occupied territory, the humanitarian crisis in the refugee camps, the impact of landmines and landmine victims of the Sahrawi, the plunder of the natural resources, and the fight for a referendum and self-determination. Stand in the Sand, you can find it on social media. If you look, in fact, tonight on my Instagram accounts, I posted a whole lot of stories from people in Rwanda even supporting this campaign over the weekend, and that is Change Agent SA on Instagram and Twitter. Go and look at the hashtag Stand in the Sand. You will see Sahrawis who actually used the hashtag, took photos in the middle of the Sahara Desert across the last few days.
Physically standing on the
sand.
Physically
standing in the sand. I was with them and we worked and workshopped on this campaign. This is an idea really pushed by the NGOs in the occupied territory as well as in the refugee camps. They are asking for people to support them, to stand in solidarity, to hold protests peacefully, to demonstrate, to talk about their cause under the banner of Stand in the Sand. They've been stuck in the sand for the past 42 years and are asking people to stand in the sand with them.
So basically what you're saying, this narrative needs to be amplified globally.
Absolutely.
Okay. So here's the thought, and there's quite a few tweets that I'll pick out just in a second or so. Here's the thought. You went on that first trip. You said you made your 5th trip to the refugee camps. And on trip 1, you made this commitment that, yes, I will do whatever I can. I will tell their story, right? So what's your involvement in all of this? Meaning, it's not, you're not a tourist. You're far more involved, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing touristy about going there. I go there, you have no access to water. There's no sanitation facilities. This is no picnic. It is very harsh. The physical, emotional, and mental tax of the work that I do is immense. However, I have seen the truth. And I know that I'm standing on the right side of history. In my lifetime, I will see these people go home. I have nothing to gain from this. I'm not from North Africa. I'm not Muslim. I am not Sahrawi. I have no relatives. I never even knew that they existed. But I have a responsibility because in my humanity lies in them. And it is in that basic principle that I have to do everything I can for them. I have lived amongst them. Nobody has told me about them. I'm not sharing with you what I've read or what I've been told. I'm telling you what I have seen. I'm telling you about my lived experience. And I continue to work with Sahrawis who are fighting for their basic freedom in the belief that a peaceful resolution is the only way that they will get to go home. They are the most unbelievable people, and I continue to learn so much from them. The way that their spirit is captured in everything that they say and do, despite the horrendous crimes that are being done against their people on a daily basis.
So, some tweets, Yusuf Abramji, away from spotlighting crime, saying, I support #stand in the sand and salute Catherine for all her sterling work. And of course, many may say absolutely thumbs up to that. There's a range of other tweets. I'll pick up, of course, Nisha Vaghez, who you know pretty well, has been tweeting a whole lot of things. So it's certainly acknowledged that you're doing just that. So and I understand that You've spoken on behalf of the Sahrawi people, even in Geneva, and just correct me if I'm wrong, on very important international human rights platforms, right? So how did, what were those platforms? How did you get now? So in effect, I get a sense you are an ambassador for this cause, right? How did you get appointed, if I can call it that, as an ambassador?
I think, the Sahrawis were shocked the second time they saw me, the third time they saw me.
Why would you come back? Yeah.
And my commitment to them is a non-negotiable, and I will do everything I can for them. I was invited to speak at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. That's quite correct. I was invited for my first visit in 2017. I was there again in March this year, and will be going again later in June.
But this is now representing
the Sahrawi people. I'm there with people from the occupied territory, as well as members of the Polisario who are representatives in Geneva. And it is an unfortunate situation, but as an international activist, as a human rights defender on this issue, I'm given platforms that sometimes they aren't. So I have to use those platforms to open doors, to make people listen, and to share the story. And I have always said I will tell their story. It's a hashtag I use because I couldn't understand what could I do, but I realized I could tell their story. So I have been trying to use those platforms to highlight the issues, to lobby, and to ensure that we bring the right people around the table to just listen. There are so many people, even within the institutions of the UN Human Rights Council, that don't know about the issue of Western Sahara. We have to do everything we can to highlight it. And if I have a voice that can do that, I need to make sure that I use it.
Is it true you've been made an honorary citizen of this state without land?
It is, in fact, on 2 Sundays ago, I was invited as an honorary member to their Human Rights Council as a representative of them internationally. I am definitely, my second nationality is Sahrawi by virtue of the work that I do, and I have a deep connection to these people, and they are my people. And as I mentioned to you, I believe that my humanity rests in them, and I can never be truly free if they aren't.
How do the people see you? I mean, I understand the heads of government, they would quite honestly use whoever they can, not in a negative way, to say, can we further our aims? And that's fine, right? Sure. But the people, you speak about your family, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
The people that you've lived with in the camps, what do they view you like? Like, who are you? What do they say about you?
I suppose you'd have to ask them that, but I can tell you they have embraced me in a way that is really remarkable. We at first never spoke the same language. We looked completely different and came from such different backgrounds. However, I was like a long-lost family member. They embraced me in a way that I can't really describe in words. I'm very known fun within the camps, especially because I'm so different. The children will run around, and they know I've come into the camp. They run around and call me until I come out of the tent where I'm staying, and they demand my time.
Do they call you Catherine? What do
they call me Caramella. And that's because my colouring...
like caramel?
Yes, that's it. So I'm Caramella, and to some of them I'm Catherine, but Caramella seems more appropriate for them. And it's for me, it's been an amazing journey. I connect with Sahrawis through the platform of social media, which is truly inspiring. I'm inspired by the hundreds of messages I get from Sahrawis that are not only in the occupied territory or in the refugee camps, but are fighting for their cause in different corners of the world, and feel inspired to continue fighting just because I'm playing a small role and doing a small part in a bigger picture and vision. But because I carry the hopes of these people in the work that I do, I've got a great responsibility to them.
Well, absolutely. And it seems like you're making an impact. Now I understand and saddened by this breaking news about the Sahrawis. I will put them on my prayers. Comes from, I think it's Manini, right? And there's another one from Castro Tabana, saying, I support the work you continuing to do for the colonized and downtrodden people of Western Sahara. With you, the world can be a better place. Referring to you, not to me, of course, right? So important one. Okay, what impact are you making? I know, having attended your very first lecture 3 years ago or 4 years ago, there was an impact, and I've never forgotten that. But overall, in our country, what's your level of impact in terms of mobilization?
I really believe that in the last 4 years, the issue of Western Sahara has become one that has been put onto platforms where otherwise it would never have been spoken about. I've really tried to make sure that every single... I can be speaking about water, and I will find a way to tell you about Western Sahara.
Bring it in.
I will bring it in. I've really dedicated everything that I do to be able to highlight and focus on these forgotten people of our continent. I believe that the work that I've done has had a huge impact. I've been able to... Being the only South African activist working actively in both the refugee camps as well as across the continent on this issue, I really feel stronger as each month moves past. I can't believe it's now been more than 4 years because I've seen a huge difference, and the momentum, there have been small wins even on an international platform, and I believe that we're moving in the right direction. It might be slowly, but we are moving in the right direction.
Let's go back to the African Union before we wrap up. So what's their position officially, and then politically, what is the African Union doing?
Officially,
because the point I'm making is, the stalemate can't just continue like this, is it?
Correct. It can't. And if one actually goes back and reads the preamble of the Constitution of the African Union, you will see that Morocco should never have been readmitted because it is violating the human rights of a fellow African country. So the African Union believes in self-determination of Western Sahara. They believe in the human rights of the Sahrawi people being respected and not violated in any way or form. However, politically, I don't believe enough is being done, and we really have to push and ask questions. However, I have to say that the African Union will not focus enough and deeply enough on African issues until Africa actually funds the African Union. We need to ask questions about where the funding of the African Union come from, because the agenda of the African Union is not being driven with an African agenda by Africans for Africa.
So you're very clear they're duplicitous in terms of how they operate.
Yes.
Okay. What about South Africa? I mean, you are in a position where I would think you're pretty well connected in this country. You have the ear of just about anybody, media and politicians that you would speak to. Are you getting through to them to step up the mobilization?
We are, and we're having very important conversations. You asked earlier about, we have a specific stance as a country, but what about other political parties? We have a very strong viewpoint by all of our main opposition, the EFF, the DA, the UDM. They're all very supportive and have been very, very supportive on the stance of self-determination and sovereignty as the way forward for the people of Western Sahara.
We're going to wrap up. How long do you think this will continue for?
It is a very difficult question. However, I believe that there are important landmark decisions that are being made currently. There's a lot of important work that is being done and pushed forward in a way now that it hasn't. It has lagged behind for the past 20 years, if not more. But I really think that in the last 3 years, we have seen great strides, and we continue to push and ensure that the issue of Western Sahara has the attention and is on the agenda. And we have to use all of our platforms and mobilize our leaders to continue pushing and moving forward, because I believe that these people will go home, and I look forward to the day that I will be there when they gain their independence and the Sahrawi people take back occupation of their land.
I think everybody would say absolutely. And in conclusion, from my side, as part of the Champion South Africa project, where we just acknowledge champions, your qualities are champion-like in terms of picking up the cudgels of the plight of people beyond our borders, but certainly part of the continent. So well done to you. Catherine, thanks for your time. I'm going to leave it. Well, so #stand in the sand. Stand in the sand. That's the key one. But I'm going to leave it to you to tweet and to Instagram me and SAFM Radio with those hashtags, pictures, videos. Absolutely. I want to share that. I think people need to know.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank
and
you so
if you
much.
send me some clips as well, I'll Facebook it as well.
Thank you
All right.
so much.
There we are. Important lessons to learn about. Well, Google them. The Sahrawi people. Can you do that and tell me what you've come up with? So check it out and maybe teach me a thing or two that I didn't quite know. Catherine, thanks for your time. We're going to talk about crime, sadly, in our country in a moment. Let's get the news. It's 9 o'clock.